In this episode of Renovate Ed, I'm excited to share insights from a conversation I had with April Nelson of Micro Air Inc. April leads a busy schedule and was a little shy about recording a podcast, but she graciously allowed me to share what we discussed privately. Her perspective is invaluable for anyone wanting to understand how mold works in our homes and how to protect ourselves from it. April has spent many years in environmental testing and air quality. She started her career in industrial field service, collecting samples from contaminated sites. Over time, she gravitated towards residential and school building work, which is where she truly found her passion, helping people to live in a safe, healthy environment. In our conversation, April shared a lot of practical and eye-opening insights about mold, mold spores, mycotoxins, commonly used solutions like opening windows or using UV lights, HEPA filters, or air scrubbers, why certain people are more susceptible to mold, and tips everyone can use at home. We also discussed why testing for mold isn't as simple as some people think. In this episode, I'm going to paraphrase what April shared, highlighting the practical takeaways that you can apply to your own home and health. So let's dive in and explore the world of indoor air quality with mold insights from April Nelson. April is a hygienist, a mold expert, and she has a degree in earth and space science. One of the things that she struggles with is that every contaminant sampled has to be used with a specific device and equipment. So she kind of needs to know what she's looking for in advance, and that way she knows how to test. And she did mention that everyone reacts differently to each contaminant. So it's difficult to diagnose a person, but there are tools that could diagnose mold in a home, for example. I was surprised to learn that there are over 300,000 different kinds of mold. Can you imagine? And like many of our other guests, she emphasized that the elderly, infants, and those with autoimmune disorders, she also added those with asthma, COPD, those types of individuals are going to be more susceptible to mold. While it's not easy to find mold in walls and ceilings, you can do some air sampling. Air sampling is done both inside and outside the home. And here's something I learned. The results may or may not indicate an indoor source if there's unique mold in the home. Results can change minute to minute due to temperatures and wind. So that's something to consider. And everyone thinks that mold comes from water. I know I myself did. But April says that everywhere you have dirt and dust, you have mold spores. She said if you walk outside, you're going to be covered head to toe in mold spores. You'll get more mold exposure in 2 minutes outside than you will 8 hours inside. That was shocking to me. But she did say despite that, it's a need to have an air purifier in an indoor environment. And she claims that UV lights, they can't catch all mold spores because they're moving so quickly through the light. So some of them are going to escape. She did also share that dead or dormant mold spores are equally as bad as live mold spores on our body, which is good for me to hear because the mold that was in my walls, that was dormant. And so some people, when I tell them that, they feel like, oh, okay, well, you're good. There's no problem with that. But April disagrees. She says dead or dormant mold spores, they're equally as bad as live mold spores. And that aligns with other things I've heard from other experts. So, for example, I heard one expert say that dead mold or dormant mold, it's even worse than wet mold or active mold because when the mold spores dry out, then they fraction, and one mold spore could fraction into as many as 500 fragments. And then now you've got these 500 fragments that are all over per mold spore floating around in your air or in your dust that could wreak havoc on your health. So that really resonated with some of the other information I've received from experts. April does say that it's not helpful to kill the spores, but it's way more effective to remove them. And the only way to do that is with a HEPA filter, which will remove 99.97% of mold spores through the air. Most mold remediators, they're going to use air scrubbers. You'll hear that term used a lot. And April agrees those are highly effective. She also did touch on new finishes and some of the chemicals and things that are found within our finishes as we finish out our homes. She did say that opening the windows is not helpful, and HEPA filters, they do not filter out gases and chemicals. So while they can help with mold spores, they're not going to help with some of the off-gassing that we're getting from our finishes in our home. The body will have an inflammatory response from contaminants. People who are being treated by functional medicine physicians and doctors, don't realize that most mold test results are going to come from what you ingest, not what you inhale. And those are going to include things like beer and wine and coffee and spices, some of the things we've already talked about in this podcast. Grains and corn full of mold and mycotoxins, but could also include things like heavy metals too. So it's not just isolated to mold. She thinks that we should have a science class about microbiology in middle school and that every doctor should be taught about mold. She's been doing testing for 17 years, and some people call and think that they have mold in their home. And she says that out of the hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of jobs that she does, almost about once or twice it's true. So in her experience, it's a lot less more frequent than what I would have assumed. She does get a lot of false positives in wall cavity checks, so she doesn't do them anymore. I don't know why. She really didn't expound upon that, and I probably should have asked a few more probing questions. I did ask her, is there anything else she would want the general public to know? If she could tell you guys one thing. Refrigerator with water supplies that allow you to get water from the door in your refrigerator, those are made of the cheapest plastic imaginable, and they cause hundreds and hundreds of water issues that have been going on for many years, 5, 10 years, on a wall behind the fridge that no one would know about. And those are toxic molds. The toxic molds, they require liquid, wet areas, and they can grow within months and years, and they require a lot of moisture over time. Those are things that develop with slow leaks. Her advice is to pull your fridge out every month or two, and you'll save yourself thousands of dollars in repairs later. So that was a summary of the conversation I had with April. I'm sure we talked about a whole lot more. That's basically the Cliff's Notes. She was a wonderful, wonderful resource. I would highly recommend reaching out to her if you want to get in touch. Her telephone number is 317-293-1533, extension 106. That's 317-293-1533, extension 106. And her email address is anelson@microair.com. Thank you for joining me throughout this 5-part series on mold. From understanding indoor air quality with John Hartley to exploring the remediation and build back process with Mike Talbot, sharing my personal journey with Valerie Poley and Elisa McDivitt, and finally gaining insights from environmental hygienist April Nelson, we've covered a lot of ground. The goal of this series has been to shed light on how common mold exposure really is, the impact it can have on our homes and our health, and the steps homeowners can take to protect themselves. Whether it's prevention, remediation, or navigating lingering health effects, I hope you've come away with some practical insights and the reassurance that you're not alone. If you've been following along, I encourage you to review any episodes you may have missed, share this series with friends or family who might benefit, and take proactive steps to improve the air you and your loved ones breathe. I'm Jennifer Goldsby, and this has been Renovate Ed. Thank you for listening, and here's to healthier homes and healthier lives.